Timothy Mitchell with HP Latex. I want to take a moment and explain some of the distinctions of the type of adhesive vinyls that you're likely to print on and cut with for our print and cut system. The reason I want to take this time is because they're not the same. And it's important to understand some of the distinctions so that you choose the right vinyl for the right application, and that also you set your expectations for the different vinyls based on the way the vinyls perform in the printer and subsequently through your workflow, especially if you have to laminate and then to the cutter. The first vinyl I want to explain is what we call cast vinyl. Now, cast vinyl is traditionally associated with, say, vehicle wraps. Cast vinyl, in this case, this is an Avery product. This is a certified media. It is the MPI 1105, and this is widely used for vehicle wraps. Cast vinyl is highly contourable. You would use it for surfaces like a Sprinter van, just what it says. Cast vehicle wraps, highly contourable. This is the most elastic vinyl, and this also carries usually the highest price tag. This is generally only used for things like vehicle wraps. If you have just a flat surface, there are some other choices, but you could use this as well. The thing about cast vinyl is, for the most part, it's very heat resistant. It goes through the printer beautifully. It'll go through the cutter beautifully. This is easy to print, easy to cut, shouldn't have any issues. This is your highest quality vinyl. It also carries the highest price tag. Now, if you're not printing on a contourable surface like, say, a vehicle wrap, then you're probably going to be printing more with what's called calendared vinyl. And there's two kinds of calendared vinyl, and it's important to understand the differences. Now, this is a HP product, and this is a polymeric vinyl. Polymeric vinyl is sometimes known as intermediate vinyl. Polymeric vinyl is sometimes also called a long chain plasticizer. See, this particular PVC vinyl in its natural state, so if you will, is not elastic. Plasticizers are added to the PVC to give it flexibility, to allow it to, be more malleable. And in doing so, this is what they call long chain plasticizer. This is a step up in quality from, say, monomeric vinyl. And it's going to usually have a little bit higher price tag. This is the kind of vinyl I like to work with for the print and cut. This is an HP product. The 3M IJ40 is an excellent choice. Avery's 2903. Those are all really good polymeric or intermediate vinyls. These are longer term outdoor. They can certainly be used for vehicles, but it would be more like the side of a truck, the flat part of a truck. And these are long-term outdoor and indoor durable decals. The nice thing about intermediate vinyl or polymeric is you can print on it with a reasonable amount of heat and everything resists shrinkage. This particular product is very good. It prints beautiful, it looks great, and it doesn't shrink. Now, shrinkage is very important to understand when you're doing a print and cut system. You don't want anything to shrink, because you have to print it and then bring it over to the cutter or to the laminator as a possibility, depending on what you're doing with it. In most cases, with our scratch resistance, you don't need a lamination. So you print it, you go to the cutter, well, everything has to line up properly. And if the material has deformed or has some shrinkage to it, it's going to change the equation a little bit. Now, we have tools that are built into our printer and cutter through the software, which are registration marks, and also basically we call it the OPOS, which is an optical positioning system, which has a straight line as well as registration marks, fiduciary marks all around the print, which control for any degree of shrinkage, comparing the original cut lines with the cut lines that you have and making adjustments accordingly. We have the most sophisticated system on the market for doing those adjustments, but still, if possible, you don't want any shrinking. And a polymeric vinyl or an intermediate vinyl will generally be 50% more shrink resistant than a monomeric vinyl. So sometimes it may be worth a little bit of extra money to get a product that's much easier to use and is much more resistant to shrinking. That is my choice. I like intermediate vinyls with the print and cut system personally because I want to print it. I want the littlest amount of front edge that I need as possible. I want to be able to bring the temperatures up, and I want to print it with no deformation and no shrinking whatsoever, and then be able to run it at high speeds. So 6-pass and 8-pass are possible with the intermediate vinyl and less so with the monomeric because the monomeric can be temperature sensitive. And that brings me to my last category of vinyl, which is a calendared monomeric. And these are two examples of calendared monomeric. This is an Orajet or Oracal 3640, and then this is an Avery 3303. There is nothing wrong with monomeric vinyl. Monomeric vinyl is generally economy vinyl. It is widely used. It is the vinyl choice for most people for price, budget conscious. It's great for indoor decals, short-term outdoor, but it performs a little different than what you're going to get with an intermediate product. So the Avery Intermediate would be the 2903. The 3303 is their monomeric. Monomeric vinyls are everywhere. They're affordable, they're available, but keep in mind that they are more temperature sensitive. They are simply more temperature sensitive by their nature. Sometimes they're referred to as short chain plasticizers. Okay? They're more brittle. They certainly are not going to last as long outside. They're more of a short-term outdoor prospect. They're more for indoor applications, just your standard decals and stickers. But I usually run these at a lower temperature, and I run them a little slower accordingly. You know, if you go back to some of the other videos about speed and temperature and ink load, if you have a more temperature-sensitive material, let's say these need 215 degrees Fahrenheit or 225 degrees Fahrenheit or 205 degrees Fahrenheit, then I'm going to run them a little bit slower to be able to put enough ink down so that the balance between the temperature, the amount of ink, and the speed is perfectly in line with one another. And because this is more temperature sensitive than their intermediate, I run it at a lower temperature than I run intermediate vinyl. When you can put more heat on it, the intermediate is going to, for me anyway, is going to give me a more satisfactory experience overall running at 8-pass because I can use more heat, I can put more ink down, I have more stability, and then when I go to the cutter, I have less chance of the cutter catching an edge or having any sort of deformation. It's also true through the lamination workflow. I have to print, laminate, and cut, and I need that all to work flawlessly. That will work in monomeric vinyl, but in many cases you're going to have to lower the temperatures to make sure that the monomeric vinyl travels through the printer properly so that you don't have any deformation. I don't want any waving, I don't want deformation, I don't want shrinkage, because if I have to laminate, I don't want it to tunnel or give me grief in the laminator, especially then if I go back to the cutter. Now, we have built-in safeguards to make adjustments for any deformation, but my position is just keep the heat down. You don't have as much of it, or you have very little, and that's going to give you a much better experience for using a print and cut system. Because you're not just printing, you're cutting. So after you print, everything has to be perfect. You want everything to line up properly here so that the Superman, when it cuts out, you don't have any deformation, and you also need to travel through the cutter and have it nice and smooth and even all the way through the cutter. If you have ridges or deformation because of temperature, it introduces the possibility that the edge of the cutter head might catch something, and I don't want it to catch anything. So those are your primary differences in vinyl, adhesive vinyl. You have cast, and you have two types of calendar. You have polymeric or intermediate vinyl, and then you have monomeric, sometimes called economy vinyl. They all work, but the monomeric has slightly different properties because of its temperature sensitivity, and that's both the vinyl itself as well as the vinyl itself as well as the liners are often a little more temperature sensitive, and you just have to make some adjustment for those. My preference is to use more intermediate vinyl or polymeric vinyl because I find I can run faster with more heat and more ink and have a perfectly flat, even print with no problems or grief whatsoever.